The bitter wind howled across the plains of Wyoming Territory as Nathan Sloane stood at the freshly dug grave, his newborn son wailing in his arms. His world had collapsed just hours earlier, when his beloved wife, Clara, had drawn her final breath after bringing their child into this harsh world. The year was 1875, and in the small settlement of Santa Rosa, 30 miles east of Cheyenne, Nathan found himself utterly alone with an infant who needed more than a grieving father could provide. "Hush now, little one," Nathan whispered, his voice breaking as he rocked the tiny bundle. The baby's cries only intensified, echoing across the windswept cemetery where the handful of mourners had already departed, leaving father and son to their sorrow. Nathan had built their modest ranch with his own hands after bringing Clara west from Boston 3 years earlier. They'd carved out a life together, raised cattle, planted crops, and dreamed of the family they would raise. Now those dreams lay buried beneath the rocky Wyoming soil alongside the only woman he had ever loved. "Mr. Sloane," a soft voice called from behind him, "you cannot stay out here all night. The baby needs warmth and milk." Nathan turned to find Cathleen Vasquez, the town's midwife, who had done everything in her power to save Clara. Her dark hair was pinned neatly beneath her bonnet, her brown eyes filled with a compassion that made his throat tighten. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, the words barely audible above the wind. "How can I raise him without her?" Kathleen approached cautiously, her shawl pulled tight against the evening chill. "You'll bring him to my home tonight. I have goat's milk that will sustain him until we find a more permanent solution." Nathan nodded, too numb to argue. He cast one final glance at the wooden cross bearing his wife's name before following Kathleen to her wagon. The journey to her small house at the edge of town passed in silence, broken only by his son's whimpering and the creak of wagon wheels over rutted earth. Kathleen's home was modest but warm, filled with dried herbs hanging from ceiling beams and shelves lined with tinctures and remedies. A fire crackled in the hearth, and Nathan felt the first hint of warmth seep into his frozen limbs since Clara had slipped away that morning. "May I?" Kathleen held out her arms for the baby. Nathan relinquished his son, watching as she unwrapped the blankets and examined him with practiced hands. "He's strong," she pronounced. "Your wife gave him a good start." "Clara wanted to name him William, after her father," Nathan said, his voice hollow. "William Sloane," Kathleen nodded, rewrapping the infant before retrieving a small glass bottle fitted with a rubber nipple. "William is a fine name for a strong boy." As she fed the baby, Nathan sank into a chair by the fire, removing his hat to reveal hair as dark as the night outside. His hands, calloused from years of ranch work, trembled as he stared into the flames. "I cannot impose on your kindness," he said finally. "There must be a woman in town who could nurse him." Kathleen's expression softened. "The widow Johnson lost her baby last winter. She might still have milk." "I can inquire tomorrow." "And then what?" Nathan asked, the enormity of his new reality crashing down upon him. "I cannot work the ranch and care for an infant." "One day at a time, Mr. Sloane," Kathleen replied. "Tonight you will sleep in my spare room, and tomorrow we will make plans." That night, Nathan lay awake listening to the soft sounds of his son breathing in the makeshift cradle Kathleen had fashioned. Sleep evaded him as memories of Clara flooded his mind, her laugh, her touch, the way she'd read poetry aloud by lamplight during long winter evenings. Her gentle voice had been the soundtrack to their life together, and now silence was his only companion. The following days passed in a blur of arrangements. The widow Johnson agreed to nurse William, and Nathan established a routine of working his ranch by day and retrieving his son each evening. He hired a young man from town to help with the cattle, but the ranch suffered from his divided attention. Each night, he returned to his empty home, placing William in the cradle Clara had lovingly prepared, and wondered how long he could continue this way. 2 weeks after Clara's death, Cathleen Vasquez appeared at his door just as dusk was settling over the prairie. "I've come to check on the baby," she explained, her medical bag in hand, "and to see how you are faring." Nathan stepped aside to let her enter. The house was in disarray, dishes piled in the sink, laundry unfolded, dust gathering on the shelves Clara had kept immaculate. He felt ashamed at the state of things, but too exhausted to care. Cathleen examined William, pronouncing him healthy despite everything. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Mr. Sloane, I lost my husband 3 years ago. I understand the emptiness you feel." Nathan looked at her properly for the first time in days. Beneath her practical demeanor, he glimpsed a shadow of familiar pain. "How did you bear it?" he asked. "By remembering that although Miguel was gone, I still had purpose," she replied. "My work helps others, and in helping them, I honor his memory." Nathan nodded, grateful for her understanding. "Please call me Nathan." "Then you must call me Cathleen," she responded with the hint of a smile. "Good night, Nathan." As winter descended on Wyoming Territory, Nathan struggled to maintain his ranch while caring for his growing son. William thrived despite everything, developing Clara's bright eyes and curious nature. The widow Johnson eventually moved east to live with her sister, leaving Nathan desperate for a solution. It was Cathleen who suggested the arrangement that would change everything. "I could come each morning," she proposed one evening as she checked William for signs of winter cough. "I have no patience until midday most days. I could care for him while you tend to your morning chores." "I cannot ask that of you," Nathan protested. "You didn't ask. I offered," she replied firmly. "Besides, this little one has quite captured my heart." And so began a new routine. Cathleen arrived each morning as dawn broke over the plains, often bringing fresh bread or preserves along with her medical supplies. Nathan would complete his most urgent ranch work before midday, then return to relieve Cathleen so she could attend to her patients in town. As the weeks passed, Nathan found himself watching for her arrival, listening for the sound of her wagon approaching down the rutted road. Cathleen brought light into his home, singing to William, telling stories in her melodic voice that reminded him so painfully yet sweetly of Clara's. One evening in February, as a blizzard howled outside, Cathleen remained later than usual, reluctant to brave the storm. They sat before the fire, William sleeping peacefully between them in his cradle. "Tell me about her," Cathleen said softly. "About Clara." Nathan's chest tightened at the request, but he found himself speaking, words spilling forth like water through a broken dam. He told Cathleen about Clara's love of books, her determination to create a garden in the harsh prairie soil, her dreams for their children. As he spoke, he realized it was the first time he had spoken Clara's name aloud in weeks. "She sounds remarkable," Cathleen said when he finally fell silent. "William has her spirit in him. I can see it already." "Yes," Nathan agreed, watching his son's peaceful slumber, "though I worry he will never know her." "He will know her through you," Cathleen assured him, reaching across to touch his hand briefly. "Through your stories and your love." The blizzard intensified, making travel impossible. Cathleen slept in the spare room that night, and in the morning, Nathan found her in the kitchen, preparing breakfast as William gurgled happily in a basket nearby. The domestic scene struck him like a physical blow, not because it felt wrong, but because it felt right in a way he hadn't thought possible again. Spring arrived, bringing new calves to the ranch and wildflowers to the prairie. William grew stronger daily, now sitting up and reaching for everything within grasp. Nathan expanded his cattle herd and repaired the fences Clara had always reminded him needed attention. Life continued, though the ache of her absence never fully dissipated. Cathleen remained a constant presence, her daily visits extending beyond necessity. She taught Nathan how to prepare simple foods for William as he began to eat solid food, showed him how to tend minor injuries without riding into town, and listened when memories of Clara overwhelmed him. On a warm May evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie gold, Nathan turned to find Cathleen observing him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I've received an offer to establish a practice in Denver. The city is growing, and they need experienced midwives. The words hit Nathan like a punch to the gut. When would you leave? I haven't accepted, she replied, her eyes returning to the horizon. I wanted to consider all factors first. Nathan nodded, unable to articulate the sudden panic rising within him. The thought of Kathleen leaving Santa Rosa, leaving William and him, was unbearable in ways he hadn't anticipated. What's keeping you here? He asked finally, his voice rough with unspoken emotion. Kathleen's gaze met his, steady and unflinching. I think you know, Nathan. That night, after she had gone, Nathan stood in Clara's garden, now flourishing under Kathleen's care. The evening breeze carried the scent of wildflowers, and for a moment he could almost hear Clara's voice on the wind. I don't know what to do, he whispered to the night. Loving her feels like betraying you. No answer came, only the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant howl of a coyote. Nathan returned to the house, checking on William before retiring to the bed he had once shared with Clara. As he drifted toward sleep, Clara's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, not in accusation, but in reassurance. In his dreams, she smiled at him, nodded toward their son, and then faded into the light. Nathan awoke with clarity he hadn't felt since the day she died. The following morning, he rode into town before Kathleen could arrive at the ranch. He stopped first at the general store, then at the small church where he and Clara had married, and finally at Kathleen's modest home on the outskirts of Santa Rosa. She answered his knock with surprise, already dressed to make her daily journey to his ranch. Nathan? Is William all right? He's with Mrs. Peterson for the hour, Nathan replied, removing his hat. I needed to speak with you alone. Concern crossed her features as she invited him inside. Her home was just as he remembered from that first night, warm, orderly, filled with the tools of her healing trade. About Denver, he began awkwardly, turning his hat in his hands. I don't want you to go. Kathleen stood very still, her expression carefully neutral. And why is that, Nathan? He took a deep breath, summoning courage. Because William needs you. Because I need you. These past months you've brought life back into our home with your kindness and your gentle voice. Her composure faltered slightly. Nathan, I know it's too soon, he continued hastily. I know my heart still belongs partly to Clara, and it always will. But I've come to care for you deeply, Kathleen. If you can be patient with me, if you can accept that Clara will always be William's mother and a part of our lives, I would ask you to consider a future with us. Tears glistened in Kathleen's eyes. I would never wish to replace Clara, she said softly, but I have grown to love William as my own. And you, Nathan, my feelings for you developed against my better judgment. Nathan crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her hands in his. Then stay. Not as William's nurse or as our friend, but as my wife, if you would consider it. In time. What of the town's gossip? She asked practically, though her fingers tightened around his. It's not yet been 6 months since Clara's passing. Let them talk, Nathan replied firmly. We know the truth of our hearts. Their courtship proceeded with careful respect for Clara's memory. Nathan courted Kathleen properly, calling on her in town, bringing William for Sunday outings, and gradually introducing the concept to his young son that Kathleen might become a permanent part of their family. The town gossips indeed had their say. Some whispered that it was too soon, that Nathan dishonored Clara's memory. Others, who had witnessed his struggle and Kathleen's devoted care for both father and son, defended the developing relationship. By autumn, when the aspens turned golden and the first frost painted the prairie, Nathan asked Kathleen officially for her hand. They were married in a small ceremony at the ranch, with William toddling between them as they spoke their vows. Nathan wore the same suit he had worn to marry Clara, but with a new hope in his heart that he believed Clara would have blessed. Their first months as husband and wife brought adjustments. Kathleen maintained her midwifery practice while establishing herself as mistress of the Sloane ranch. She expanded Clara's garden, planted apple trees that would bear fruit in years to come, and filled the house with music from the small piano Nathan purchased as a wedding gift. When spring arrived again, Cathleen discovered she was expecting their child. William, now nearly 2 and speaking in complete sentences, patted her still flat stomach with fascination when they explained he would be a big brother. "Baby," he pronounced solemnly, making both adults laugh. The pregnancy progressed well, but as Kathleen's time grew near, Nathan found himself gripped by a terror he couldn't shake. The memory of Clara's death haunted him, and though he tried to hide his fear, Kathleen sensed his dread. One night, as they prepared for bed, she took his trembling hands in hers. "Nathan, look at me," she commanded gently. "I am not going to die." "You can't promise that," he whispered, anguish clear in his voice. Clara was young and strong, too. "I have delivered hundreds of babies," Kathleen reminded him. "I know the risks, and I have taken every precaution. Dr. Harrison from Cheyenne has agreed to attend the birth. But Nathan, even if the unthinkable happens, you must promise me something." He met her gaze, his eyes damp. "Anything. Promise you will not close your heart again," she said firmly. "William and this new baby will need your love completely." Nathan pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I swear it. But Kathleen, I cannot lose you too." She held him until his breathing steadied. "You gave me a new life when I thought my purpose was only in my work. We will face this together, and we will welcome our child together. Have faith, my love." Summer heat settled over the Wyoming Territory as Kathleen's time drew near. Nathan hired additional help for the ranch, determined to remain close to home. Dr. Harrison arrived from Cheyenne a week before the expected birth, bringing modern medical equipment and a confidence that eased some of Nathan's fears. Labor began on a clear July morning. William was sent to stay with neighbors, and Nathan paced the porch as Kathleen's cries occasionally reached him through open windows. Dr. Harrison's assistant emerged periodically to report steady progress, but as hours stretched into the night, Nathan's anxiety mounted. Near midnight, when the prairie was bathed in moonlight, a new cry pierced the night, the unmistakable wail of a newborn taking its first breath. Nathan froze, listening for Kathleen's voice, for any sign that history had not repeated itself in cruel symmetry. The door opened, and Dr. Harrison appeared, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and a broad smile visible even in the dim light. "Congratulations, Mr. Sloane. You have a healthy son, and your wife is asking for you." Nathan stumbled forward, barely managing words of gratitude as he rushed inside. There, in their bed, lay Kathleen, exhausted but gloriously, miraculously alive, cradling a tiny bundle against her breast. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice hoarse but strong, "come meet your son." He approached reverently, sinking onto the edge of the bed to gaze at the red-faced infant. Tears flowed freely down his cheeks as he touched his son's delicate fingers. "He's perfect," Nathan breathed. "You're perfect. I feared." "I know," Kathleen replied softly, reaching up to touch his face. "But I told you to have faith. Our family has a guardian angel watching over us." They named him Nicholas after Kathleen's father, but gave him the middle name Clayton in honor of Clara. When William returned home the following day, he approached his new brother with solemn curiosity that quickly blossomed into big brotherly pride. Life on the Sloane ranch settled into a new rhythm. The cattle herd prospered, and Nathan expanded their holdings when the neighboring property became available. Kathleen continued her midwifery work on a limited basis, often bringing William and Nicholas along when attending to pregnant women in town. As the boys grew, Nathan shared stories of Clara with them, both her courage in coming west, her love of poetry, her dreams for the ranch. William, though he had no personal memories of his birth mother, treasured these tales and the small keepsakes Nathan had preserved for him. 5 years after Nicholas's birth, Kathleen presented Nathan with a daughter they named Eliza Rose. Their family complete, the Sloanes became fixtures in the growing community of Santa Rosa. When Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, Nathan served briefly on the town council, while Kathleen established the settlement's first proper clinic. On William's 18th birthday, Nathan took him to Clara's grave, now marked with a proper headstone rather than the simple wooden cross of his earliest days. They stood together in the autumn sunshine, the young man nearly as tall as his father now. "I wish I could have known her," William said quietly, placing wildflowers on the grave. "She would be so proud of the man you've become," Nathan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes when you laugh or when you're deep in thought, I see her in you so clearly it takes my breath away." William nodded, absorbing this connection to the woman who had given him life at the cost of her own. "And Kathleen? Do you think Mother would approve of how our family came to be?" Nathan smiled, thinking of his wife of 17 years now, waiting at home with Nicholas and Eliza. "Your mother had the kindest heart of anyone I've ever known until Kathleen. In my darkest hours after losing Clara, I sometimes felt I heard her voice, guiding me toward the light again. That light was Kathleen, who saved not just you and me, but our future." Father and son walked back toward their horses, the Wyoming wind sweeping across the prairie just as it had on that terrible day when Nathan had stood alone with an infant in his arms. That evening, the Sloane family gathered around the table in the expanded ranch house that had grown along with their family. Kathleen served her famous apple pie, while Nicholas regaled them with tales of his adventures at school. Eliza, only 13 but already showing her mother's healing instincts, detailed her care of an injured fox kit she'd discovered. As laughter filled the room, Nathan caught Kathleen's eye across the table. 20 years had passed since Clara's death, years filled with joy, sorrow, triumph, and the everyday miracle of family life continuing, despite loss. Kathleen's once dark hair now showed strands of silver, and fine lines marked the corners of her eyes, but to Nathan, she had never been more beautiful. Later, as they prepared for bed, Kathleen noticed his thoughtful expression. "You visited Clara's grave with William today," she stated rather than asked. "Yes," Nathan confirmed, taking her hand. "He asked if she would approve of our family." Kathleen's expression softened. "And what did you tell him?" "The truth," Nathan replied, "that Clara's gentle spirit guided me through my grief toward you, and that without both of you, none of this would exist." He gestured to encompass their home, their life together. "Clara gave me William and taught me how to love. You gave me the strength to love again and built this family with me. Every day, I thank God for both of you." Kathleen leaned into his embrace, her head resting against his chest. "Sometimes," she confessed quietly, "when I'm delivering a particularly difficult baby, I swear I can feel Clara's presence not as a rival, but as an ally, helping me bring new life into the world." Nathan kissed her forehead. Overwhelmed by the grace of this woman who had accepted his broken heart and helped piece it back together. "Her voice brought me back from the brink of despair," he murmured. "But your voice, Kathleen, your voice gave me a future." Outside their window, the Wyoming stars shone brilliantly against the vast prairie sky. The Sloane Ranch stood as a testament to love that transcends loss, to family bonds forged in adversity, and to the healing power of a gentle voice that guides the way home. On the mantelpiece, in a place of honor, sat 2 photographs, one of a young Clara in her wedding dress, her eyes bright with promise, and beside it, a family portrait of Nathan, Kathleen, and their 3 children. Not separate histories, but one continuous story of a family built on love, loss, and the courage to begin again.